Now, this image here, I think is a good example because from first look, it doesn't look like it really is anything special. It's shot of a window with rain on it, and on the opposite side are two trams. There's a tram here and a tram here, one going this way, one coming towards us, which you can see by the lights. Now, there's a few things here that I would want to bring out. I know that there's quite a bit of color hidden behind here. I know that the texture is very interesting. So those are the things that I'm going to try to fix. So I'm going to go into my develop. And I think really to get myself started, I really want to get rid of this extra frame here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a guided transform. So, and I'm just going to draw these lines. You saw this in the other video. I'm just going to draw these lines on the frames. And it is a little tricky, especially I'm using my trackpad. So that can be a little bit tricky to get exactly right. Like that. Okay, so you see how it kind of readjusted it. So the window is fully framed straight up. And then I don't love, you know, the extra stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to crop it in. I'm going to go in a little bit further because I don't want, you see this handle? I don't want that handle to be part of it. And then on this side, I don't want the frame, but I do want the bottom because I like the reflection that is happening there, that color from the windowsill outside, and I don't want to lose any of that light there. So here we go. This is my new crop. I kept it with the original aspect ratio, but if I wanted, I could make it extra long, pull this up like that, and then I'm keeping like the entire window. So that's much better already. There you go, before and after. Now I do really want to play with the colors. So for me, I feel like the exposure is good, and I look at the histogram, bam, right in the center there. So I'm not really going to play with that so much. The temperature, it is quite cold if we look in here. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit cold because it is like a rainy day. But those colors outside are a lot of reds and yellows. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just see. There we go. That looks better for my eye. It's warmer now. It's more the color that I saw in real life. And now I'm going to go right down into my HSL sliders first. So the first thing I have is these reds. Now, if you remember from the previous video, reds are tricky. I actually quite like the way the red looks here, but I would like to see it a little bit more. If you remember in Lightroom, we have this little option that allows us to pick a color and it will pull up all the matching tones. So it's the oranges and the reds. And I'm going ahead and I'm pulling up the saturation there. I also want the brightness to come through it a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same with my luminance. There are some other colors hidden in here that I want to bring up. If we look like in this section, there's some like purples and blues. So I want to see what I can pull out of that. So I'm going to click and pull up here. All right, now you'll see that sometimes it does hit something else. So it's hitting this orange, not the blues I was looking for. So not always does this one work the way you want it to. Here we go. There are my blues. It's actually pulling up more a magenta. I want to bring up the blues that I see there and the aquas that I see there. So I'm going to do that. The other thing is I like this yellow, but I want it to be more of a gold yellow. So I'm going to just shift the temperature. You see if I go up, it's going to be more of a greenish. And if I shift down, it's going more to the magentas. So I want to be closer to the down side, to the magenta side, to make it more of like a golden yellow without being fully red. All right. So other things in here, obviously my HSL, let's play with the luminance a little bit there. I don't want to lose the color, so I'm going to pull it down to regain the color there. But at the same time, I'm going to pull up the whites a little. I want those to kind of pop through. And maybe the blues as well. And one thing that I really liked about this when I took the shot was that there were a lot of colors up here at the top that aren't really coming through right now. So if you remember, we can go ahead and we can do a gradient mask. And that's perfect for a situation like this where it isn't a specific object, it isn't a specific part of the frame that needs like precise selection, and it does kind of gradiate from the light to the dark in the frame. So this is perfect. I'm going to highlight this and make this my gradient, my mask. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to shift the hue a little bit towards the blue end because I want it to kind of bounce off the heat at the bottom. I am using fine adjustment here, and I can also kind of do that with my white balance. But I don't want to go too far because I don't want it to be like blue. But I do want to increase the saturation to bring up that saturation a little bit more. And I showed you this in the other video, I can actually add a color to here. I think if I were to do this, I'd want it to be like a bluish purple, but I would have wanted it to be pretty subtle. So I'd be down more in the gray area than in the intense area. You see the difference there. And the more I look at it, the more I feel like I actually like the yellow that it comes with, but I would want it to be a little subtler like that. Okay, so that's it for my mask. I don't think I want to do any other masking on this one in particular, but maybe one thing I want to do is I want to bring the texture of those raindrops up more. In my presence, I want to just show you what these do, and then we'll talk about them after. So let's start with texture. Okay, so do you see this difference there? It is literally sharpening those raindrops, blurring them out. Let's get closer. Okay, so you can see that the contrast, the sharpness is coming through in that a lot. I would not put it that high up. I'm just going to put it back to 0 so you can see the other presence. This is clarity, so watch clarity when I go all the way up and all the way down. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same. One thing clarity is good at is bringing up that contrast, but again, if you do it too far, you're losing all that pretty color that I made, and so on. So we're just going to drop that back down. And now I want to show you dehaze or dehaze. Dehaze excels at cutting through glass and reflection. So if you have some reflection that you want to bypass or fill in, try this and it will make a big difference. For my case, I'm going to dehaze just a little bit and I'm going to add a little bit of texture. And that's it. Okay, so I think we're pretty happy with this. The last thing that I'm going to do, and this is usually the first thing I do, but in this case, it is going to be the last thing that I do. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to use my tone curve. Now, because I know that I'm working with these blues in my shadows, I'm going to go right to my blue tone curve and I am going to pull up my blues a little bit in the shadows to fill it in. I do like how the highlights have a little bit of that yellow as well, so maybe I'll pull that up as well. And then I'm going to do an overall lifting of the shadows to kind of flatten it out a little bit, just to my taste. All right, let's look at the before and after. So you can see the shift there, not only in the perspective, but also in the color detail, as well as the detail in the raindrops. Okay, let's look at another photo here, something a little bit different. Here we go, we have a pretty standard landscape shot. We have some water, we have nice bright blue skies, we have some pretty buildings. So what do we do here? I'll be honest, these are not my typical types of shots, so I don't usually process things like this because it's not my norm. And again, I have to fix that. This is my new library and it auto sharpens. I don't like that. So I'm going to go ahead and let's start by seeing how we can level this without any work from us. I'm going to start by just doing an auto level, which is actually not bad because it just kind of shifted everything forward. You see that? So the buildings are more straight up and the horizon seems pretty straight from this. It's hard to tell because you know we're at an angle here. The next thing I would probably do is go into my exposure. I feel like it's quite dark, and then I look at my histogram and it is quite dark. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shift it and see if I can get that exposure up a little bit. You notice that I did it on my histogram, and watch, my blacks down here are actually moving. So you can do it that way. I can go into my highlights and do the same thing. If that is a fun way for you to interact with the sliders, by all means, do that. You can also just do it straight here. So if I lift the exposure, the overall exposure, the real problem though are my shadows and my black. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those up a little bit. And I went too far on the shadows. I don't want it to be, just so you can see, shitty HDR. That's not what I'm looking for. Okay, so I don't want to go all the way one way or the other. If that's the look you're going for, then by all means do it. But just, you know, try to be level-handed with it. Okay, so it's a little bit brighter. I feel like the shadows are still too far up. There we go. And pull those back down. Some other things that I might want to do. This is pretty true to life, and I'm pretty happy with it, true to life. But you can go ahead and adjust further. Maybe I'm just going to bring the saturation up a little bit. The blue is quite blue, so I might go into my luminance and just lighten it a little bit by lifting that. And then the hue itself is pretty cyan. I mean, I guess that's more or less what it looked like, but I would probably shift it just a little bit so it feels a little more natural to my eye, as someone who doesn't see blue skies very much. Then other things we can go through and we can kind of adjust for smaller pieces. I can try to get rid of some things like cars and so on and so forth. But if I'm just doing like a simple ready to go edit, that's a very quick way of doing that. So I wanted to show you a quick edit that works. Okay, so for the last image in this video, I wanted to use something that had both people and scenery in it. The people are in pretty deep shadow except for on their faces. And actually that's what attracted to me to this scene anyway, is that everybody's very anonymous, everybody's in shadow, but this woman has a nice rim light around her face and bringing her in. So first thing I would do here is I would look at my exposure. Look at my histogram. Very heavy on the blacks and the shadows. If I just pull up the overall exposure, that helps a little bit. And I don't want to go too far on this because remember, the shadows are what attracted me to begin with. So if I go all the way, you know, I'm losing that. I don't want to lose it. I just want to see those highlights a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. I can also do some spot editing here. If I select subject, I'm curious. Yeah, I thought they might do that. They want this to be the subject, which is more or less true. But I'm going to go ahead and just paint a little bit more because she is the main subject here. Okay, and then we can go ahead and bring up just those highlights a little bit more. Maybe the shadows a little bit. You don't want to do kind of a solo exposure too much because look what it does. It's not, it becomes very obvious that you're doing spot editing when you do that. Okay, that's much better. Now I want to just play with my color a little bit. I don't love the color. It's kind of just flat. There's not much going on there. I like to see the brick a little bit more bricky. I'm going to pull up the saturation a little bit. I'm going to adjust the temperature, the hue, excuse me. As far as the sky, I feel like the sky is fine in color, but I want to brighten it a little bit maybe. Same goes with the water there. So I'm just picking different parts where I feel like it could be brightened up a little bit and pulling it up on the luminance. We're going to look at some faces, some portraits in a minute. But one thing that luminance is really good for is skin tone. So if I want to bring up her specifically, I could just pull that way and we'll have her brighter. Other things I can do, we have this color grading. I haven't talked about this at all because I think it can be quite daunting to people. But color grading is a very powerful tool and it allows you to do some interesting things. So we have our midtones, our shadows, and our highlights. We have these color wheels. So midtones. Well, let's start with shadows. What are shadows? Here they are. If I make my shadows blue, bam, it's blue. What are highlights? Those are the bright parts. So look over here. If I make that orange, there we go. So the teal and orange is unfortunately a fad that, we saw a lot of. This is a very easy way to do it. And the midtones are the stuff in between. So if I do red midtone, you see both the highlights and the shadows are being adjusted. So this is a really fun way to kind of really play with the color. If I want my shadows to be on the blue end, I don't think I do in this image though, because this image is quite cold already. So I actually feel like I want my shadows to just stay. But the highlights, maybe the highlights I want to, I'm just going to reset everything actually. The highlights I might want to kind of add some color to brighten them up. And then you'll notice this is like your extreme, how much of it are you actually doing? It's like a balance between the two. So before and after, it's quite subtle, but it does warm up her face a little bit. And then we can blend it, but I only did the highlights, so that doesn't matter so much. If I come back to my tone curve, I didn't talk about this one because I don't personally like it, but it's like a constrained tone curve here, so you do it by the region. This does mean that you don't tend to go overboard because you're kind of within the limits of what is there. Okay, I don't actually use this really ever. I prefer to just do it on my own, go it alone. So I'm just gonna lift to my taste and then maybe bring up those highlights a little. There we go. And I still feel like it's quite cold. It's not quite doing what I wanted to do. And I think part of that is just because of the darkness of it. And then I also feel like all of this is quite unbalanced. So I'm going to try a different crop. I like the bike in the foreground. I like the kids sitting there. I like the trash. So I'm going to try to like cut some of those kids off. And there we go. And the last thing I want to do is I want to go back to my blues. I want to bring back some of that blue into the sky because I do think it actually helped quite a bit. And I lost it a lot when I was playing with my luminance in the sky. All right, so that's better. It's not exactly what I would like to come from this, but it's a relatively good start and at least a place to go from and play around with some more. All right, so one more image to look at, and this one is all about the color for me. I like the shadows, I like the orange with the green, and those are the things I want to play up. Things I don't like this kid. I feel bad that he's there. I didn't realize he was there when I was taking it. So I'm going to cut him out, and I'm also going to adjust the lines. Now, here's the thing. This building is actually probably, the image is probably straight, but the building is tilted. So that's really up to me or you, if it was your image, how you want to approach that. So you want that to be straightened up like this or not. I think it's fine. No one knows if the building is actually crooked or not. So I'm going to leave it like that. And I'm just going to crop out the child. And I think I actually like how this crop plays out because I like the shadow here, but I also like the highlight up here, but maybe I'll crop it down for this little triangle. I'll just keep the tip of that in there. So that's better. Okay, so for me, it's all about the shadows, which I am going to strengthen, and the highlights, which I am going to pull up a little bit. So already you can see a minor shift here. Look at this reflection here. Do you see it? It basically goes away because of my pulling the shadows down, you see? So that's up to me whether I want to lose all that detail in there or not. For me, yeah, because I was looking at the shadows. I wasn't really looking at what was inside. For me, the focus of this is the oranges and the light. Now, some things that are here that I like, this is more of a green and it's kind of hard to see that. So I'm going to try playing with that a little bit. Yeah, there we go. You can see it a little bit more as a green now. And I kind of want it to be more of a teal green. So I'm going to pull, you see the color, blue, yellow, you see that? So I'm going to go more towards the blue end. And let's just try the luminance a little bit more to make it pop a little bit more. That's better. Now the oranges, I don't want to lose any of the beautiful orange colors, so I'm going to pull down the luminance on the oranges. And I might just pull the saturation up a little bit. And then as far as these like blown out highlights, I like those. So I'm going to pull up the luminance on the whites and the backgrounds a little bit because that helps me see the contrast between the shadow and the highlights. Now for this one in my tone curve, I want those shadows to be dark. So instead of lifting them like I would normally do, I'm just going to kind of add like a little bit of a flat in here. Or if you guys remember our S curve, it's a good way to pull the bright from the dark. And now just because I am the way I am, I'm going to pull it up a little bit just to flatten it. Okay, let's look at before and after. Definitely more contrast, definitely more texture. Maybe too much contrast, so that might go in and do a little bit more tweaking on that.